Let's talk about strategies to disengage or disconnect from the other parent. We have patterns that we communicate in. Your other parent says or does something, and then you say or do something. And then the other parent says something, and then you say or do something. What patterns do you have with your children or with the other parent that need to be broken? I had a father whose mother usually did the exchanges with his ex-girlfriend. And the child was relatively small, under 1. And the father would really get anxious if he had to do the exchange. And one day, mom wasn't going to be around, and so he had to do the exchange with his ex. And so he came into class, and he said, guess what I did? And I said, what'd you do? He said, my ex always irritates me and gets me worked up. And I was thinking, what could I do? He says, I wore bright pink shorts to the exchange. I imagined him in like bright pink like boxers with like satin and big polka dots, purple polka dots or blue polka dots. And so he said, I went to this exchange, and the girlfriend kept saying, why are you wearing those shorts? Why are you wearing those shorts? He said, we never did talk about the child. She couldn't get her imagination away from why he was wearing those shorts. He got such a kick out of it, he wanted to share it. Another mom, this is a little bit longer story, but this mom, her ex-husband, always brought one child back on Monday to the school and then took back the kid who wasn't quite in kindergarten yet home. Now, they lived about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic, apart in San Diego and Riverside County. So the mom would get really worked up that she had to get in the car at 5 o'clock after work, drive all the way down to San Diego to pick her daughter up because dad wasn't following the court order. Court order said drop both kids off. And his attitude was, well, she's not in school yet, so I can play with the rules any way I want to. Sound familiar? You might know somebody like that. And so mom would get more and more worked up as she would drive down to pick up the child. She'd drive into the condo complex. She'd pull her car over, all worked up, really upset. And then the same routine would happen. She'd get out of the car, she'd go knock on the door, and he'd open the curtain just a little bit, just to irritate her, right? And she'd go sit in the car, and he'd wait for 15 minutes before he sent the child out. So not only was it an hour drive where she was getting more and more angry, it was another 15 minutes just to stab her in the chest, she thought. And I said, why don't you do this? We know he's going to follow the court order in September when school starts for the child. He said he would, right? You got into court, no one can enforce or take somebody by the hand and say you will follow this rule, right? So we've got 3 months to go. I think it was like end of May or something. I said, I have an idea. Why don't you do this? Why don't you get yourself the biggest boom box you can find? And I want you to make sure it's got batteries in it and drive down to the condo complex, put the boom box on the hood of your car, turn the volume up as loud as you can, and dance in the cul-de-sac like a crazy person. She loved it. She had tears rolling down her cheeks because she had this image of her messing with him. You see, he thought she was crazy, or at least he told everybody she was crazy. I told her, you might as well act crazy. He thinks you're crazy. She never actually did the boombox, but she changed the way she went down there. She also knew in September it would end. She changed the perception of how she responded, and it changed all those concepts. Another story. One time I loaned a father glasses that when you push the little light, they flash like the LCD does. And there were these plastic glasses. Now he's a big, tall guy, relatively taller than me, maybe taller. And then mom was about my height. And then the child was about 4 or 5. And so dad had to go to a doctor's appointment, and mom and him and the child were all going to be there. I loaned him a pair of blue glasses that flashed and pink glasses that flashed. He loved it. He went to the exchange wearing these glasses, flashing the whole time. And at one point in time, his ex-wife started yelling at him, and she says, he told me later on, I saw him, I was standing there, and I saw her looking up, yelling at me, and all I could think back, looking down with the flashing glasses was, this must be funny. Did he change the way he perceived the event? Yes. I had a woman that came in and took 6 weeks of my parenting class in person. And then about a year and a half later, she came back to me and said, I'm still having trouble. What happened was the judge had actually taken the children and given them to father. And the mother was having a lot of problems. She just hated her ex. He would write her nasty emails. So we worked on rules to control the contact and communication, and I gave her things to do. Her husband could look at the emails instead of her, and he could respond instead. She could take the emails and drop them in another box and then have somebody look at them later so she didn't have a panic attack every single time she heard them. We did all sorts of stuff. But the one that finally worked for her was that one day we were sitting at the table, and she's complaining about this guy, and I was sitting at the table, and I said, you ought to think of him like a roach. You just smash him and then flick him on the floor, and then you reach down and hold him up by his feelers and you say, I've had enough of you. Well, just like the other mother with the boombox, she had tears running down her cheeks. And it was a lot more dramatic. I banged on the table and I got on the floor and I picked up this little roach. I was really dramatic. She got it. She saw him now as this little teeny tiny non-powerful thing that could transform her life. You see, when there's been domestic violence, when there's been physical violence, when there's been emotional violence, when there's been constant control, when there's somebody who's really hurting the children, when there's somebody who's a knucklehead, part of the problem is you feel powerless to figure out what to do. And our society teaches you to stay a victim. They teach you, oh, sorry, poor you, we're going to give you some counseling and stuff. But they don't necessarily teach you how to create a distraction. They don't teach you how to shift your mind around how much power you really have. So I want you to think this week about doing things different. Look at the way you have an interaction with your ex. Talk to them in a different way, or view them a different way, or stop talking to them even better. View them as a roach. View them as with dark sunglasses on. Wear different clothing. Wear a wig. It doesn't matter. All I can tell you is it's really important you change up the way you respond to the other parent. You see, there's lots of people in our life every day that can annoy us. They can frustrate us. They can drive us crazy. Our ex may take up the most amount of time, right? But if it's not your ex, it's a boss, do something different. You can do anything at exchanges to change it up. You can wear dark, goofy sunglasses. I have a collection of about 50 different pairs of fun sunglasses. If you want more information about this, we have a blog and you can address questions and share success stories. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next lesson.